Fantastic. So thanks for the invitation, Mark. I am a resident in Central Park. My current title with Denver Urban Gardens is the compost coordinator, and I'm actually the garden leader for Greenwood Community Garden, which is located on Spruce and 23rd, behind the dog park there. So Denver Urban Gardens is a local nonprofit. Our three pillars are climate, food, and community. And one of the things that we're tasked with is really sharing information right now about composting. We can go to the next slide. I think this is the big question right now. Everyone's super excited, and we do know about our volume-based pricing, which was in effect as of this year. And so some other regions, other states call it pay as you throw. And really what the intention is to incentivize waste reduction. So currently we are below the national average with only around 26% of our materials that are going to the landfill. Most of our waste is not being diverted. We have an opportunity for over 75%, which would be recyclables and compostable organic material that could be diverted from the landfill. So the amount that we are diverting is quite low, and the amount that we could be keeping out of the landfills, there's a lot of opportunity there. So that's sort of a little bit of the background of why the city kind of went in this direction. Also a lot of public feedback and support for that. So some of you may know already that we are getting weekly recycling. So that's our purple bin that's being picked up weekly. It used to be every 2 weeks. And now we're adding free compost service. So I myself was a compost customer in Central Park, and we would pay for recycling. But now what they've done is we pay for our trash. You can choose your trash bin size based on the needs of your household, and composting is going to be free. So there are rebates available. We're one of the only states that has a rebate program for our trash. And so that's really kind of where the direction that we're heading. We can go to the next slide. So I think most of us are pretty familiar with the purple cart, what can be recycled. Not a lot has changed here. This is all pretty standard. And we can go to the next slide. But what is new is this compost rollout. So what's been really exciting in the Cole and Clayton neighborhoods where Denver Urban Gardens is located is that we're starting to see compost delivery. So we went from 30,000 compost customers, so people who had already signed up for the program, to now all 180,000 sort of Denver single family home residents are anticipating a compost cart delivery. So what you will receive is a big green cart, compost cart, a kitchen pail, and that's where you can countertop pail, you put your food scraps, and then a how-to guide. So they are providing some educational material. One of the biggest changes right now with the compost program is for prior consumers. You might know that you were able to put in paper and cardboard and soiled napkins and things like that. So there has been a big shift for us to produce a more quality product. A1 Organics is our composting facility, and everything is trucked up there, and they have a giant $1 million facility with a lot of equipment where they are doing the composting process. So there's a lot of confusion because there's compostable materials, which refers to organic materials, but composting is actually a process which requires a lot of infrastructure, mechanical movement, water, sifting, sorting, all that good stuff. So it's quite an involved process for anyone who's tried to do some backyard composting on their own. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is one of the mailers, and we have this as a PDF that I could definitely share that could go out in along with this presentation. This presentation has live links in it, and then of course there's the recording. And so really what we're doing is simplifying this, because we are expanding to so many new customers who maybe aren't familiar with compost in general and what it's used for. That maybe they don't garden, or they don't have, landscaping that's using compost as a soil amendment, something that really helps with that whole life cycle of carbon. Simplifying it so it's food scraps and yard debris. And again, we used to allow paper, and there used to be, some other things that are technically compostable, but those were really just contamination, because there was a lot of things ending up at A1 Organics that was not compostable. And we can go to the next slide. Great. So this kind of ties into that. You will get a little bucket, so the countertop bucket, which can be rinsed. You don't have to use bags, but this was a bit of a compromise. What happens is when we have these compostable bags, these are the only ones that are CMA approved. So the Compost Manufacturer Alliance, it's kind of like a governing body for what is compostable and what isn't, and what can be labeled as such. There's no legal regulations saying that if you call it compostable, it actually has to be proven. So that's where that greenwashing comes in, unfortunately. What we were seeing is a lot of stuff was hidden in these bags that was not compostable. When we visited their facility, we were seeing tires, diapers, Christmas decorations, plastics, clothing, all kinds of stuff. So contamination is a really big issue in the composting industry. But, with that said, a lot of people are a little nervous about having compost and just collecting it and putting it in their green bin. So this was a compromise. These are the 4 different bags that are approved that people can purchase to put inside their little container if they want, and then transfer them to their large green bin. So unfortunately, going to farmers markets and all those different events where there's compostable cutlery, plasticware, plant-based, natural products, biodegradable, all of those terms are not biodegradable, not compostable in field conditions. They might be in lab conditions, but that's where what they were seeing is just that all of these cups and plates and different things were not actually composting out in field conditions. So that's just giant wood rows of organic material getting turned, and so they've had to kind of clean up that waste stream to be able to produce a product that we'd want to put back into our gardens. Let's go to the next slide. Great. So this is, like I said, some of those live links. I think the biggest question that we get is, what is recyclable? What can we put in the recycling? The rules, it feels like it keeps changing. A lot of that comes down to the end user. They do really make it easy for you. So the city does have an app. It's a trash app. You can find out when your trash day is, when the extra collection days are. You can report if they missed collection. And there's also a waste directory and even a kind of a sorting game in the app. So, if you're, working with your kids, or maybe a teacher, or just curious for your own reasons, if something can be recycled or not, it's pretty easy to find that out just by using these different tools. A lot of the information that I've shared, in addition to which neighborhoods are getting their compost bins first, how they're doing the billing, the invoicing, the rollout, all of that can be found on this link, denvergov.org/expanded collection. And that's where a lot of the information, when you actually click through the different Q&As, hit next and go through, most of our questions will be answered there. But a lot of it is, we're expanding to so many consumers. The billing is slow, the rollout is slow. We had to purchase the bins, they had to get people to be able to deliver them, and they're being delivered by district. And so it's not our typical political districts, it's their trash district. So once an entire neighborhood is getting their compost bins, the customers, the residents are getting an info packet about the billing, the invoicing, and the mail. And then, pretty soon you'll just all of a sudden see your whole neighborhood will be, green bins will be everywhere. So it's happening in phases. They're starting in areas where there's already a lot of compost customers. So, hoping that their folks are kind of educating their neighbors and it won't be a really big change. But of course, we've got a lot of opportunities to know what goes in our green bins and what doesn't. And another question that we get a lot is, well, I live in an apartment. What is happening with my compost and recycling service situation? So these services are for residential family homes of 7 units or less. So if you live in an apartment or a condo or something where there's more than 7 units, this Waste No More ordinance is what would apply to you. And that's a new ordinance that just went into effect, citizen-led, and that passed. And so now there are recommendations that have been formed by a task force, and that's open for public comment as of now. So going to this website, if you are in that living situation, or even businesses, restaurants, office buildings, that is all open for public comment. And those recommendations will be going into effect, and they'll start to look into that probably later this year. We can go to the next slide. And lastly, this is sort of where my realm is in public education, not just sharing information about recycling and how to use your green bin and waste reduction and collection services. But we do offer free public classes through Denver Urban Gardens in collaboration with CASR. And these classes are hosted at one of our demonstration sites at Gove Community Garden, right behind National Jewish. They're every Saturday. We do a worm workshop, which is an indoor composting option. I have a worm bin in the office. I have a worm bin at home and also at my community garden. So that's a great way to manage kitchen scraps. You can also put your coffee filters, tea bags, paper, soiled napkins, anything like that that can no longer go in the green bin. The worms do a great job of decomposing that. And so this is just an option for people to come if they want to compost in a tumbler and do that in their backyard. Even patio composting is an option. So we do offer a lot of classes and information at our demo site on those options. And I think that was probably the last slide. So I will stop there, and happy to take any questions.
So as always, I'm going to let everybody else go first, just in case anybody has questions, because I usually have stupid and silly ones.
No silly questions.
So nobody's going off mute. So I'm going to ask a question that somebody had asked in a previous meeting, which is they saw that in one place in Boulder, they were doing dog poop composting from one of the dog parks. And they were curious what it would take to get that in our area.
Yeah, so that would be a private hauler. Animal feces is a potential zoonotic threat and can spread pathogens. It's a public health risk to humans. And so I'm not sure if it would probably be a very private company that was offering that service, and that is not something that is going to go into our residential waste stream. So that would be putting the haulers at risk and anyone who was working with that compost. That would be contamination. So you can put bones, meat, dairy, all of, anything that is organic material into your green bin. The one exception, of course, is feces. And so that is not something that is going to be allowable. That would be considered contamination in our green bin collection services.
Okay. I will let them know the next time I have that conversation. It was more a question of, is there a way to get that private hauler? I think I figured out who they were online once, and can figure out again if we wanted to try to arrange for something like that in the area. But yeah, that was a private company.
Private company, and you could hire their services, but it would be on an individual basis, would be my guess.
So one of the questions I have is, as a longtime compost subscriber, First, I'll say I'm very happy with the rollout personally so far. You probably don't hear that very much yet, because my bill went down and my services are better now because I get weekly recycling instead of every other week. So thank you for that. Please spread that word. But the one thing I've run into is I'm on the south end of the neighborhood near Aurora, and the bins in Aurora for regular trash are green. So when I have people in the neighborhood, or service workers or construction workers or whatever come by, they or some people who just haven't been here very long and stay living in one of the accessory dwelling units, or home little apartments over the garages. Sometimes people throw trash in my compost bin. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that. I just figured I'd let you know that's probably one source of some of that stuff, is just people from other areas who don't know and end up throwing the wrong stuff in the wrong bin, just because they, see green. And when I'm coming up Yosemite out of through Aurora, I see green, and that's their trash bin. So I don't know if there's any tips you have for us, for those of us, near that area, on how we can minimize other people throwing stuff in our bin. But that would be, I would love to hear if you have any thoughts.
That is excellent feedback. I did not realize that Aurora has green trash bins. That really confuses the messaging,
Yes.
because I don't know if we're trained from early on. Purple or blue is recycling, black is trash, green is compost. And this our cups, we're now moving towards reusable rather than compostable
Uh,
in large event organization. And our cup has a green bin, and a lot of times people are putting food waste in there because they're so
mm,
used to green means compost. So that's really helpful feedback. I will bring that back to Dottie, to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, because that's something that they, if we, this Waste No More initiative and looking at Denver as a whole, that's important information to know that Aurora has green bins and then we have green compost bins.
yep.
That's really
Actually,
confusing.
I,
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
kind of I kind of think that Aurora, it's all private because the city does not provide any of those services. So, Mark, you're going to get, because where you live,
Mm,
uh, because those of us that are right near the Denver Aurora border have faced that phenomena, as well as businesses, because people, if they're not paying for private pickup, they're dumping their stuff
mm.
wherever they can dump it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. And you're correct. It is a private hauler and a different hauler than what we have in the city and county of Denver. So that's definitely something that's important. My recommendation would be, there is a way that you can drill a hole and actually lock your compost bin. So, in a commercial building, if I take recycling out, if I take compost out, I have to bring a key and unlock a little padlock and put my trash in there. And that's to prevent contamination and people from using those bins. So that is one option. And then when you do put it out the day of just for collection, then obviously you take the lock off. I did notice on my compost bin, I X'd out the middle part, which said paper, because you can't have paper anymore. The new bins will have new signage. But the biggest thing is maybe a sign or a poster on it that says no trash in English and in Spanish. And so that's what we've been doing at some of our community gardens to help with contamination, is really just a visual of like, this is not for trash. But your best bet is to keep your bins in a secure location, or to actually physically lock them, so that they're not being used as trash receptacles.
Yeah, I think that the locking them is probably the most viable, because I don't, of all the bins, the compost one is the one I least want to put in the garage, right? It's the stinkiest of the three. So so we'll run into that. So the next question I have relates to the unfortunate not being able to put paper in there. For those who know me well, they know that I go to Chipotle a lot, and Chipotle used to have compost at a lot of their stores, because they would tell you to be able to put your bowls in it because it's paper based. It sounds like now nobody gets to do that, and they've removed all their compost from all the stores that I've been to, anyways, because I think they were having contamination problems because they were getting like plastic cups in their compost, etc. So I'm sure it's a lot harder at businesses. But I was curious about the worm part. How hard is that, especially to get started? Like, is there like an Amazon kit you can just order with a bunch of worms and you all throw it in there? And or because I tried to do composting at home, and the problem I ran into is I'm not going to water my compost. It just seemed silly, but it's Denver, it's dry, and everything, nothing broke down because it needed more water. So is there um, maybe we need like a rain barrel compost bin or something like that around here? That's like a specialized thing. But is there any tips you can give us on those of us who would love to not start putting all of our paper stuff in uh, the trash? What's the easiest way to kind of get going with the worm thing, especially those of us who, shall we say, don't have green thumbs and don't do, urban gardens and stuff like you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Worm bins are surprisingly easy. I mean, we have a lot of classrooms that have worm bins. So, if school teachers and kids can manage that with the amount of education that's required, contamination, it is actually really easy. So there's a lot of tips about it. I just use a regular Rubbermaid bin. It's got some holes in it. I put all my paper in there, newspaper, and then leaves. So fall leaves is the perfect time to get started on a worm bin. We have some local worm suppliers to get you started. There's a lot of resources online. Probably the best bet is to attend one of the public classes. We have our full event calendar and schedule online on our events calendar. And the worm workshops are always the first Saturday of each month. So our next one will be in September, and then we'll have another one in October. And that's where you can really see a bin in action. You can see what the worms look like in an outdoor environment. It's a similar, system indoors. But if there's ever an interest, I mean, I've done a lot of, I have a worm nanny YouTube series for my garden, and there's a lot of resources, even in our Doug Instagram channel. So for anyone who is worm bin curious, I think there's a lot of ways through Doug to get that information, and happy to host tutorials and Q&As and get people started, because my worm bin has been going since 2019. I've populated multiple other bins, and yeah, it's actually pretty easy to do. And compost does need water, because microorganisms need water to survive. And so if they can't, they don't exist, then they're not gonna be able to do their job. And they're really the workhorses of this whole composting process. I love the idea of a rain barrel. I'm using the rain barrel water for the compost. That's what we do at our community garden now that those are allowable in Colorado. So that's a great option, because I understand the hesitancy to use water. Wastewater is always an option, gray water. But yeah, that is a factor in Colorado with our dry climate.
I have a quick.
Yep, go ahead.
I know that you're not allowing paper products, but if somebody burned their paper in their barbecue and added the charcoal to their compost, is that allowable?
Yeah, I mean, charcoal, I mean, it would just be dust. It would be ash dust. So that would be fine, because that's already a processed product. And yeah, that wouldn't be, nobody would notice that. So it's just more that, like, preventing cardboard, like giant pieces of cardboard, which don't break down easily. They have tape on them. That's really the thing. But even your ashes and stuff that came out of your, wood ash from your fireplace, if you had a wood burning fireplace, that would be able to go into your green bin.
So how voracious are these worms? Like if I put a Chipotle bowl or say 3 of them per day in there because my son eats it a lot too, are they going to be able to handle that volume, or do I need like a giant worm dumpster or something for stuff like that?
Yeah, so for paper products like that, you would want to shred it. So you're just going to be cutting it into small pieces. It really is going to be their bedding, and they do decompose their bedding. They consume the bacteria that are decomposing the food scraps and living on the paper and the leaves and everything that are in there. It's a little ecosystem.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, instead of using a newspaper, which is what I use as my carbon source, you would use your Chipotle bowls. So
Okay.
that and a little bit of leaves, and your worms would live happily ever after.
And as far as you know, there isn't a place where I can just go buy a pre-assembled with worms bin and just, put it in there and start feeding it. No.
No, unfortunately not. I mean, there are some online stackable bins and different systems. You can buy, really it's just a Rubbermaid bin is the simplest way to do it, a 10-gallon flat, a Rubbermaid bin with holes and two lids. You can buy different systems, but even in my experience in classrooms, those don't tend to do very well. And really it's just the plain old 10-gallon bin has been the kind of tried and true method. But there are lots of them out there. Feel free to check it out. There's a lot of local suppliers, Earthlink, Princess Garden Worms, Jim's Worm Farm, where they literally mail you a bag of worms and you throw it in with your bin and your paper. And we'll actually be hosting some workshops at Ace Hardware coming up soon to show the whole system. So yeah.
Okay. I wish I could say that I'm anywhere nearly as crafty as most school teachers, but I'm not. They're much more advanced in that stuff than I am. So I will continue to do my research. I am, as you said, worm bin curious, but it'll take a little time to figure out what's going to work in the family and stuff and make sure that it's not too stinky. So anybody else got any questions? Because I think that's all the time we mostly have for tonight, but I didn't want to cut anybody else off if they're off camera and wanted to join in. Hearing nothing, I will say thank you for coming. Thanks for the presentation. I'll make sure to take the recording and share it as widely as possible. And good to see you, and I appreciate all the information.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to share the PowerPoint with the links. Let me know if you need any
Will
other
do.
information. And yeah, happy to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.